Starbucks is moving some corporate positions to a new facility in Nashville. In an internal email obtained by King 5, the company says this will impact direct and indirect sourcing and sourcing operations teams, but Starbucks did not comment on how many employees will be relocating. The office in Nashville is expected to open later this year.
Today, we need to talk about something almost nobody is paying attention to, and once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. Imagine you're a Starbucks employee walking into the SoDo headquarters in Seattle. Same badge, same elevator, same desk you've had for years. Except this month, half your team got a different kind of email. Not a layoff notice, something quieter, a relocation notice. Nashville, Tennessee, new building, new tax rate, new state. And they're not the only ones packing boxes. On April 21st, 2026, Starbucks announced it's investing $100 million to build a new corporate hub in Nashville. Over the next 5 years, the company expects roughly 2,000 support jobs to be based there, 1,200 of them in technology. Average salary reported at around $125,000 a year. Some of those jobs are brand new. Some are being insourced from contractors. And some, according to the company's own internal memo, are simply moving straight out of Seattle. This is not a rumor. This is not a hit piece built on speculation. This came from Starbucks itself, in a letter to its own employees, and it was confirmed by Tennessee's Department of Economic and Community Development the same week. And here's why this is not just a corporate real estate story. This is happening in the hometown of Starbucks. The company was born in Seattle in 1971. Its global headquarters has sat in the SoDo neighborhood for decades. And now, less than 4 months into the term of Seattle's newly elected Socialist mayor, the company that put Seattle coffee culture on the map is quietly building its second home 2,000 miles away, in a state with no income tax and a governor rolling out the red carpet. This is not just about one coffee company. This is not just about one mayor. This is a warning sign about what happens when a city's political rhetoric and its economic reality stop matching up. So hit that subscribe button, because this one goes deep. Let's get into it. Let's start with exactly what happened, because the timeline matters more than the headlines. In March of 2026, Starbucks confirmed it was moving its sourcing and supply chain teams from Seattle to a new office in Nashville. At the time, the company insisted Seattle would remain its global headquarters. Then, on April 21st, the real scale came into focus. Technology teams, 1,200 jobs worth, also headed to Tennessee. Starbucks' own head of HR, Sarah Kelly, wrote to employees that the Nashville office would be, in her words, a complement to Seattle, where the company will maintain a large presence. Corporate language. Here's what it actually means. Whole departments that used to sit in Seattle are now being told, some of you are moving, some of you are staying, and we're not telling you which in advance. One senior Starbucks executive, speaking anonymously, said that when the company insists Seattle is still headquarters, people inside the building are rolling their eyes. That's not a hostile outside critic. That's someone who works there. Now, here's why this matters more than a normal corporate expansion story. This is not a small regional outfit chasing cheaper rent. This is the company that invented the modern coffee house and turned it into a $30 billion a year global brand. Starbucks employs around 3,000 people at its Seattle headquarters alone. It has anchored the SoDo neighborhood's economy for decades. Its name is stitched into Seattle's identity the way Boeing's is, the way Amazon's is. When a company like that starts building its second brain somewhere else, that is not routine. That is a signal. And it's not the only signal. Starbucks has been closing stores in Seattle too. Several closures in 2025. 5 more confirmed in March of 2026. The company has also cut roughly 2,000 jobs company-wide under CEO Brian Niccol, including 300 corporate positions and 61 employees in a technology department reorganization. To be clear, some of that is ordinary corporate restructuring. That has nothing to do with Seattle politics. Companies cut jobs. Companies reorganize. We are not going to pretend every layoff in America is caused by one city's tax policy. That would be dishonest. But here's what nobody is connecting right now. While all of this was happening, Seattle's political leadership was sending a very different message to the business community. Let's follow the money, and let's follow the timing, because the timing is not subtle. On March 30th, 2026, Washington Governor Bob Ferguson signed Senate Bill 5346 into law, a 9.9% income tax on every dollar of household income above $1 million a year. Washington had rejected a state income tax 10 separate times since 1934. That streak is over. The state's entire economic identity, no income tax, built to attract entrepreneurs and executives, changed with one signature. 2 weeks later, on April 14th, at a public forum at Seattle University, Mayor Katie Wilson was asked whether she was worried about wealthy residents leaving the state because of the new tax. Her answer: "I think the claims that millionaires are going to leave our state are super overblown." And when asked about the ones who do leave anyway, she said simply, "Bye." That's the part that should stop you cold. Not because a mayor made a joke, because of what was happening in the local economy at that exact moment. Let's be fair here. Wilson didn't invent Starbucks' cost pressures, and she didn't personally write the millionaire's tax. That came from the state legislature. But she is the mayor of the city these companies call home, and her posture toward the business community had already been set months earlier. The day after she won her election in November 2025, Wilson stood outside a Starbucks on Capitol Hill, joined striking baristas on the picket line, and told the crowd, "I am not buying Starbucks, and you should not either." That was Seattle's incoming mayor, publicly calling for a boycott of the city's most famous company, before she'd even been sworn in. I want to be honest with you because this is where the story gets nuanced. A boycott call and a tax vote and a corporate relocation decision are not the same thing, and we can't prove Starbucks moved 1,200 jobs to Nashville because one mayor waved goodbye to millionaires at a college forum. Starbucks itself has never publicly cited Seattle's tax policy or its political rhetoric as the reason for the Nashville expansion. What the company has said, repeatedly, is that Nashville offers a deep talent pool, proximity to suppliers, and room to grow. But what we can say is this: the math around Seattle got harder in 2026. At the exact moment the city's new leadership was telling businesses their concerns were overblown. And by late May, even Mayor Wilson seemed to sense the story had turned on her. She told the New York Times that her boycott comments caused more harm than good. She admitted in a separate interview that she'd broken her own boycott, ordering a drink at the Pike Place Market Starbucks. That is not a small walk back. That's a sitting mayor publicly reversing herself on the signature economic statement of her first term. In the same week, the New York Times ran a story with the words "Socialist" and "taunts the rich" in the headline. Now let's get into the numbers, because this is where ideology stops mattering and arithmetic takes over. Downtown Seattle's office vacancy rate sat at roughly 36.5% in the first quarter of 2026, up from 33% the year before. That's reportedly among the highest office vacancy rates of any major metro area in the country. Amazon, the city's second largest employer, has reportedly shifted roughly 10,000 jobs out of Seattle proper in recent years, according to business leaders, including the Downtown Seattle Association's own president and CEO, John Scholes, not out of the region, out of the city. Meanwhile, Nashville is adding 2,000 Starbucks jobs at an average salary of $125,000, backed by a $100 million investment, with the state's governor personally shaking hands at the announcement. That is not a rounding error. One city is watching office towers empty out, and its own hometown company build its second headquarters somewhere else. Another city is rolling out a welcome mat with no state income tax attached. The math does not care about political intentions. Let's make this real for a second, because it's easy to talk about corporate headquarters and forget the people underneath the press release. These are not hedge fund managers deciding where to park a yacht. These are baristas who unionized and went on strike hoping for a better contract, and are now watching their own mayor backpedal on the support she promised them. These are technology workers in Sodo who came to work assuming their office would still be there in 5 years, and are now being told, quietly, some of you are moving to a state you've never lived in. These are the small businesses around the Sodo headquarters that depend on Starbucks employees walking in for lunch. The shuttle drivers, the building maintenance staff, the coffee shops that aren't Starbucks, ironically, that rely on foot traffic from thousands of corporate employees. When jobs move, they don't just take a paycheck with them. They take the lunch order, the dry cleaning drop-off, the after-work happy hour. That ripple runs through an entire neighborhood. This is not just Seattle's problem. This is a playbook, and it keeps repeating in cities and states across the country. Raise costs on high earners and employers. Watch businesses quietly relocate operations, department by department, to lower-cost states. Watch leadership downplay the exodus in public, even as the internal memos say otherwise. The tax base doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes, one relocation announcement at a time, until a city wakes up and asks where all its office workers went. This is the loop, laid out plainly. Costs and taxes go up. A company quietly shifts a department out of state. That department's payroll tax revenue goes with it. The city's budget gap gets a little wider. Leadership responds, not by making the city cheaper to do business in, but by looking for the next place to raise revenue, and the next company watching from the sidelines takes note. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is how tax bases erode, city by city, decade by decade, and it has played out in other American cities before Seattle. The names change, the mechanism doesn't, and Seattle isn't the only voice raising this concern. Former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz, the man most associated with building the company into a global brand, wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal this spring, criticizing the city's direction. He argued that Seattle's leadership has chosen to treat business as an opponent rather than a partner. Whatever you think of Schultz personally, that's not a cable news commentator or an out-of-state politician saying that. That's the man who ran Starbucks out of Seattle for decades, watching his hometown company build its second brain somewhere else, and saying the quiet part out loud. Even people who backed Wilson's election are starting to say it differently now. Seattle City Council member Rob Sarker publicly praised her energy right after she won last November. 6 months later, he told reporters he is gravely concerned about what the Nashville expansion could mean for the city's economic base. That's not an opposition talking point. That's a former ally watching the same numbers we're watching and changing his tone. Let's zoom out one more time, because the comparison here is not subtle. Tennessee has no state income tax. It has right-to-work laws. It has a governor who shows up in person to shake hands with the executives, announcing 2,000 new jobs. Washington just ended a 90-year streak of rejecting an income tax, added a nearly 10% tax on income above $1 million, and its mayor's first major public comment on the subject was to laugh and say bye. Tennessee's own economic development officials have said publicly that they don't get into the politics of it, they just try to win the jobs. One state is trying to make it easy to grow a business. The other state, at least in its public messaging this spring, made it look optional to even care. So let's bring this all the way back to where we started. Back to that Starbucks employee in Sodo, checking their email, wondering if their department is next. The Nashville expansion did not happen in a vacuum. Starbucks didn't wake up one day and randomly pick Tennessee. Washington passed the largest new tax in its modern history. The same spring, Starbucks was finalizing plans for a 2,000-person office outside the state. Seattle's new mayor spent her first months in office telling striking workers to boycott the city's most famous employer, then telling a room full of people that millionaires leaving was basically a punchline. And months later, she was on the record admitting that approach backfired. Here's the bottom line. We cannot say Katie Wilson single-handedly caused Starbucks to build in Nashville. That's not what the evidence shows, and it would be dishonest to claim otherwise. What we can say is that Washington changed its tax identity. Seattle's leadership treated business anxiety as an overreaction, and in the exact same window, the city's most iconic company committed $100 million and roughly 2,000 jobs to a state built around the opposite approach. Starbucks says it isn't leaving Seattle. Its own lease runs through 2038. But intentions and incentives are two different things. And incentives are what move headcount. This is what it looks like when a city's political class assumes its economic base will simply stay put no matter what signals get sent. The math does not care about slogans, and it does not wait for an apology tour to catch up. I want to hear from you. Are you in Seattle? Are you watching something like this happen in your own city, your own company, your own industry? Drop it in the comments at it because these conversations matter more than the headlines let on. If this broke something down for you, hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and tap the bell so you actually get notified. Stay informed, stay sharp, and never stop following the money. I'll see you in the next one.